Mountain Man came to buy cattle, but Rancher offered him his 3 fattest daughters instead. The marketplace of Clear Creek Valley bustled with noise, traders shouting prices, ranchers haggling over calves, and townsfolk jostling for bargains. In the midst of the chaos stood William Harlan, the mountain man. Tall, broad-shouldered, and quiet as a stone, he had come down from his cabin in the high country to buy cattle for the coming winter. All eyes turned when Jedediah McGraw, the aging rancher whose debts were the talk of the valley, staggered on to the auction block. His face was ruddy with drink, his voice booming with false bravado. "No cattle to sell this season," he slurred, "but I've got something better." With a theatrical gesture, he pointed to the 3 young women standing stiffly at his side. "My daughters, Janice, Rose, and Clara, the fattest girls in Clear Creek, strong hips, hearty appetites. Which one of you wants a wife?" The crowd erupted with laughter, cruel, jeering laughter that cut sharper than any blade. Men nudged each other, tossing crude jokes. Women covered their mouths, whispering in tones half scandalized, half delighted at the spectacle. The 3 sisters stood frozen, faces burning with humiliation. Janice fought back tears. Rose stared at the ground as though wishing it would swallow her whole. Clara, the youngest and fiercest, clenched her fists, her eyes sparking with fury. It was then that William Harlan stepped forward. He had come for cattle, not this. His voice, low but steady, carried above the laughter. "Mr. McGraw, I came to trade for livestock, not to see decent women mocked like cattle. Your daughters deserve respect, not ridicule." The laughter died. A hush fell over the crowd, and in that silence Clara's fiery gaze locked on William's, seeing in the mountain man not pity, but a dignity no one else had shown them. After the marketplace humiliation, word of Jedediah McGraw's outburst spread like wildfire across Clear Creek. By sundown, every saloon table and church pew buzzed with whispers about the McGraw sisters put up for auction. At the ranch, far from the laughter, the truth looked different. The McGraw homestead, once prosperous, now sagged beneath years of neglect. The barn roof leaked, the fences leaned, and the pastures were thin from overgrazing. Inside, the sisters tried to carry on as though nothing had happened, though the sting of that morning hung heavy in the air. Janice, the eldest at 30, moved silently through the kitchen, kneading bread with the precision of habit. Her body was large, her hands roughened from work, and her shoulders bent as if carrying more than sacks of flour. She had once dreamed of teaching children, but had stayed to keep house when their mother died. Rose, 25, had a softer spirit. She loved flowers, even in a valley where drought starved the soil, and often hummed old hymns while she mended clothes. The taunts of the crowd haunted her most. She had always hoped for gentleness, for a man who might notice her laughter before her waistline. Clara, only 21, was fire where her sisters were quiet. Her figure was the most mocked of all, broad and strong, but her chin never bowed. The humiliation in town had left her cheeks blazing with anger rather than shame. "Let them laugh," she spat. "Better laughter than begging on their knees like father did." Yet her bravado masked a wounded pride. As the sisters worked, a knock sounded at the door. It was William Harlan. He had carried their father home after the collapse and stayed long enough to see the ranch's desperate state. Now he stood at the threshold, hat in hand, voice steady. "Your father needs rest," William said, "and you need help. Let me mend your fence at least. A wolf could walk through your pasture as it is." Clara narrowed her eyes, suspicious. Why would a stranger do such a thing? William met her gaze evenly. Because a man doesn't walk away when he sees good folks in trouble. For the first time, the room softened. Janice offered him a chair. Rose poured water into a cup with trembling hands. Clara remained guarded, but in her eyes flickered something new, not gratitude, but curiosity. As the days passed, William's presence grew familiar. He rose with the sun, mending rails, patching the barn, chopping wood. He asked little in return, only that they share a meal with him at day's end. Around the supper table, he listened more than he spoke, but when he did, his words carried weight. He addressed Janice as ma'am, praised Rose's hymns, and never once mocked Clara's fiery tongue. Slowly, the sisters realized that the mountain man was unlike the townsfolk who had laughed at them. His silence was not judgment, but respect. And in that respect, something fragile began to grow. Hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they were worth more than the ridicule of a cruel crowd. Yet shadows lingered. Jedediah lay weak in his bed, muttering of debts and papers he had signed. Whenever the subject arose, the sisters exchanged worried looks, their voices dropping. It was clear there was more to their troubles than broken fences. And William, though an outsider, could sense a storm was gathering. 3 mornings after William's first visit, the sound of wagon wheels echoed across the McGraw yard. Clara stood at the porch rail, her shawl pulled tight against the dawn chill, watching as William harnessed his mule to their battered wagon. Jedediah had insisted that one of the girls ride into town with William to fetch medicine and supplies. His voice had been weak but urgent. "Get the tincture. Don't let Henderson's men near this place, and, for heaven's sake, don't speak of the papers." Janice, ever the dutiful eldest, offered to go. Rose shrank back, timid at the thought of the town's cruel eyes, but William's gaze had settled on Clara. "You've got the strongest back," he said simply, "and the sharpest tongue. If there's trouble, I'd rather have you at my side." Clara bristled at being chosen, yet couldn't hide the flicker of pride in her eyes. She climbed onto the wagon without another word, though her jaw remained set like stone. The road to Clear Creek twisted through autumn hills. The leaves burnt gold and crimson against the pale sky. Yet beauty could not mask the hardship. Ruts jostled the wagon, and the mule's breath smoked in the cold air. Silence stretched thick between them until Clara finally broke it. "You must think us pitiful," she said, eyes fixed on the reins in his calloused hands. Fat daughters, mocked in the street, a father too sick to stand, a ranch hanging by a thread. William kept his gaze on the trail. "I think you've worked harder than most men in town. I think your father's pride cost you dearly. And I think the folk who laughed at you wouldn't last a day chopping wood in these hills." Clara blinked, taken aback. No man had ever spoken to her like that, plain, steady, without a trace of pity. For the first time, she studied him. Broad-shouldered, sun-darkened skin, beard flecked with silver. He looked carved from the same granite as the mountains he came from. But his eyes, when they met hers, held no hardness. The wagon jolted suddenly. One wheel slipped deep into a rut, throwing Clara against him. He caught her instinctively, his arms steady around her shoulders. For a heartbeat too long, neither moved. Then Clara pulled away, her cheeks hot. "Mind your driving, mountain man," she muttered. William only chuckled softly. "Mind your balance." When they reached town, Clara felt every stare like a dagger. Whispers followed them down the street, the fat daughter with the hermit from the hills. But William walked tall at her side, carrying the medicine bundle in one hand and offering his arm with the other. She refused it at first, then finally, grudgingly, rested her hand upon his sleeve. At the apothecary, as Clara waited near the shelves, she overheard voices at the counter. Mr. Henderson, the surveyor, stood in heated conversation with Deputy Kettering. "Once the old man's gone, those girls won't stand a chance," Henderson sneered. "The contract's binding. The water's ours. The railroad will have this valley by spring." Clara's stomach turned to ice. She gripped the shelf to steady herself. Henderson glanced her way, his lips curling into a smirk. "You'd best enjoy your mule ride, Miss McGraw," he taunted. "Pretty soon you'll be walking off this land with nothing but the dress on your back." Before Clara could answer, William stepped forward, placing himself squarely between her and Henderson. His voice was calm, but edged with steel. "You've said your piece," William told him. "Now step aside." Something in his tone made even the deputy shift uncomfortably. Henderson muttered under his breath, but obeyed. Clara exhaled slowly, realizing she had been holding her breath. On the ride back, the air was colder, the clouds heavy with the promise of snow. Yet Clara felt a strange warmth she couldn't explain. She glanced at William as he guided the mule with steady hands. He hadn't struck Henderson, hadn't raised his voice, but his quiet defense had spoken louder than fists. "You could have walked away," Clara said at last. "I don't walk away," William replied. "Not from folks who need standing by." The words settled deep in her chest. She turned her face toward the horizon, hiding the shimmer in her eyes. For the first time in years, the laughter of the town didn't echo so loudly in her head. The first snow came early that year. By the time William and Clara returned from town, the mountains were already draped in white, and the McGraw ranch seemed even more fragile beneath the weight of winter. With Jedediah confined to his bed and the sisters struggling to keep pace with chores, William's presence quickly became more than a courtesy. It became necessity. At dawn, he was outside splitting logs, his axe ringing like a bell through the frosty air. Janice would open the curtains just long enough to watch him, a strange look of relief in her tired eyes. Rose, humming softly as she prepared porridge, often carried a steaming bowl to the porch rail for him, and Clara, though she pretended indifference, found her steps carrying her to the barn whenever he was near. The cabin, once silent except for the groans of their sick father, now pulsed with quiet industry. William repaired the stovepipe so the rooms no longer filled with smoke. He patched the roof with tarred canvas, stopping the leaks that had plagued them for years. He taught the sisters how to sharpen tools, and one morning he even showed Clara how to swing the axe without straining her back. "You're strong," he told her, guiding her hands along the worn handle, "but strength without balance will wear you down." Clara flushed at the nearness of him, the warmth of his breath visible in the cold. She swung again, this time clean, the log splitting with a sharp crack. William's quiet nod of approval felt like a medal pinned to her chest. Inside the cabin, other transformations bloomed. William always waited until the sisters had eaten before he served himself. When Jedediah groaned in pain, it was William who mixed the tinctures with steady hands and coaxed the old man to drink. He never intruded, never commanded, yet his presence smoothed the jagged edges of their lives. It was Rose who noticed it first. One evening, as the four of them sat around the fire, she leaned toward Clara and whispered, "He doesn't look at us the way the others do." Clara, arms crossed tight, muttered, "He's just polite." But her heart betrayed her. She remembered the way William had stepped between her and Henderson in town, the way he had caught her in the wagon. She remembered the sound of his voice, low, steady, unshaken, and it kept her awake long after the fire died. Janice, too, found comfort in him. One night, when the storm rattled the shutters and her father's cough worsened, William sat by the bed and read aloud from Jedediah's worn Bible. His voice was not practiced but earnest, each verse spoken as though carved from stone. Janice wept quietly in the corner, not only for her father's suffering, but because, for the first time in years, the house felt less abandoned. But it was Clara who wrestled most with his presence. She had built her armor thick, sarcasm, fire, defiance. Yet William seemed to see straight through it. When he praised her for her hard work in the barn, her cheeks burned. When he listened, really listened, to her sharp retorts, she felt both seen and unsettled. And when, one evening, she found herself laughing, truly laughing, at one of his rare dry jokes, she froze. She had almost forgotten she could laugh without bitterness. Still, doubts gnawed at her. "He's a mountain man," she told herself. "He'll leave when the snow clears. We'll be left just the same as before." And so she guarded her heart, even as it betrayed her with quickened beats whenever he drew near. Winter deepened, nights grew longer, meals humbler, yet within the cabin a fragile warmth took root. Around the fire, William would sometimes speak of his life before the mountains, of battles fought in the war, of friends buried, of the silence that had driven him into solitude. His eyes grew distant, haunted, but when Clara challenged him, "So you just ran from the world?" he only nodded. "Sometimes a man runs not because he's weak," he said quietly, "but because he's too broken to stand." The words pierced her. She knew what it was to feel broken, to stand before a jeering crowd and hold her chin high while inside she withered. For the first time, she saw William not as savior, but as equal, another soul scarred by a cruel world. One night, as snow beat hard against the roof, Clara found herself lingering by the hearth after the others had gone to bed. William sat sharpening his knife, the firelight dancing across his features. She hesitated, then asked softly, "Why do you stay, William? You don't owe us anything." He looked up, meeting her eyes with steady calm. "Maybe I stay because I want to. Maybe I stay because I see worth where others don't." Her throat tightened. She turned away, pretending to tend the fire, but her hands trembled. Outside, the wind howled like a warning. Inside, beneath the glow of the hearth, something unspoken stirred, fragile, dangerous, but undeniably alive. By midwinter, the ranch stood steadier than it had in years, thanks to William's tireless work. But the calm was deceptive, like ice covering a river ready to crack. Trouble was circling, and Clara felt it in her bones. The first sign came with a letter. One morning, the post rider delivered an envelope bearing the seal of the Western Pacific Railroad Company. Janice's hand shook as she broke it open. Inside was a formal notice. The company claimed legal right to Clear Creek's water source, citing a contract signed by Jedediah McGraw. Unless the family vacated by spring, the sheriff would enforce eviction. Clara's face burned. That's a lie. Father would never sell the water. Without it, the ranch is nothing. Jedediah, propped weakly against his pillow, closed his eyes. I signed something, he whispered. They came when I was sick. Henderson and a lawyer. Said it was a loan, just to tide us over. I never meant. He coughed hard, his voice breaking. William took the letter, studying the fine print. His jaw tightened. This clause here, he said, tapping the page, it's been altered. The ink's newer. Different hand. The sisters exchanged fearful glances. If the railroad's claim stood, they would lose everything. 2 days later, Henderson himself arrived at the ranch, flanked by 2 armed men. His voice dripped with mock courtesy. Ladies, Mr. Harlan, I trust you've received our notice. Best you start packing. Spring thaw isn't far. Clara stepped forward before her sisters could shrink back. This land is ours. You forged that paper. Henderson smirked. Big words from the fattest of the fat daughters. Careful, girl. Words won't stop the law. Before Clara could answer, William's shadow fell over them. His voice was low, controlled. Leave this land, now. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Henderson, sensing the steel in William's stance, gave a mocking bow. Enjoy your winter, mountain man. Come spring, the law will be on our side. As the men rode off, Clara's hands shook with rage, but William touched her arm gently. We'll fight this, not with fists, not yet, with truth. That night, while the sisters slept, William sat by the fire with a stack of worn papers Jedediah had kept in a trunk. He compared seals, signatures, dates. Clara, restless, joined him. She watched as he traced the pen strokes with a calloused finger. You know how to read contracts, she said quietly. William hesitated, then spoke. I was a soldier once. After the war, I worked as a lawman for a time. I learned to see where men bend the law for profit. It's why I left. Too much corruption. Too much loss. His eyes darkened, shadows flickering across his face. Clara leaned closer. Loss? My wife, he said, voice low, and my son. Fever took them. I couldn't save them. Couldn't even get the doctor to ride out. He was bought off by men like Henderson, busy lining their pockets. He swallowed hard. So I walked into the mountains and stayed there, easier than watching the world rot. Clara's defiance softened. She saw beneath the rugged strength a man hollowed by grief, yet still willing to fight for others, for her. The next morning, William saddled his mule. I'm riding to the county seat. I'll search the records, find proof this contract's a forgery. Clara stepped onto the porch, her breath misting in the cold. Then I'm coming with you. He studied her, weighing her resolve. It won't be safe. Neither is sitting here waiting to be thrown off our land. Their eyes locked, fire meeting steel. At last, William nodded. Pack warm. We leave at dawn. Inside, Rose clutched her rosary, whispering prayers. Janice smoothed their father's blanket, tears in her eyes. They all knew the journey ahead would decide more than just land. It would decide whether shame and deceit would crush them, or whether courage and truth could win. Snow still clung to the ridges when William and Clara returned from the county seat. Their saddlebags held proof, the original contract, free of the damning clause. But word traveled fast, and Henderson was waiting. They rode into the ranch yard to find dust rising, the crunch of boots, the metallic glint of rifles. Henderson, flanked by Blackwood the lawyer and Deputy Wade Kettering, sat smug in the saddle. Well now, Henderson drawled. Thought you'd be clever, Harlan? Poking around county records? Waste of time. The law's already ours. William dismounted slowly, his every movement measured. "The law's not yours, Henderson, not this time." He pulled the document from his coat, raising it high so all could see. "This is the original contract. No mention of water rights. The paper you carry is a forgery." Blackwood sneered. "Baseless accusation. The court will laugh you out the door." Before William could answer, Clara stepped forward. Her voice rang clear, carrying across the yard. "The Reverend Alden witnessed the signing. He's already given his sworn statement. You tricked our father when he was ill, and you thought no one would notice." Laughter erupted from the railroad men, but it faltered when townsfolk began gathering at the fence. Neighbors, ranch hands, mothers with children, they'd followed whispers of the coming storm. Deputy Kettering spat tobacco. "Enough. By order of the law, this land belongs to the railroad. You've got 1 hour to clear out, or we'll clear you out ourselves." William's hand hovered near his holster. His voice was calm, but carried steel. "You'll have to come through me." The yard went still. Henderson's men shifted uneasily, the tension thick as thunder. Kettering sneered. "You think you can stand against the law?" William took one step closer, towering like a granite peak. "This isn't law. It's theft dressed in badges and fine suits." The crowd murmured. Some of the townsfolk edged nearer, emboldened. Clara felt her chest swell with pride as William turned not just to her, but to everyone watching. "This land belongs to the McGraw sisters. Their father built it, and they'll keep it. If you want to take it—" He drew his revolver, the barrel gleaming cold. "You'll have to do it in front of every witness here." The silence was deafening. Henderson's smugness drained, replaced by calculation. He had numbers, but not conviction. And the weight of the community was shifting, eyes narrowing on him. Clara stepped beside William, chin high. "We're not afraid of you. We have the truth, and the town knows it now." For a long, dangerous moment, no one breathed. Then Henderson jerked his reins, his voice sharp. "This isn't over." With a signal, his men backed down, retreating in a cloud of dust. The yard erupted in shouts, neighbors cheering, sisters clinging to one another, tears and laughter mixing. The battle wasn't finished. The court still waited. But the tide had turned. Clara's hand found William's. His grip was strong, steady, promising more than protection. For the first time, she believed they might win, not just land, but a life worth living. That evening, when the dust had settled and the last neighbor drifted home, the ranch grew quiet again. The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing shadows on the log walls. Clara sat at the table, her hands folded, still trembling from the day's events. William came in from the cold, snowflakes melting on his coat. He placed the kettle on the stove and poured her a cup of tea before sitting across from her. No words passed at first, just the silence of two people who had stared down danger and lived to tell it. Finally, Clara broke the stillness. "We may have won today, but they'll come back. Men like Henderson don't give up so easily." William met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "Then we'll be ready. The truth is stronger than their lies, and you're stronger than they'll ever admit." Her throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. "No one's ever said that to me." He reached across the table, his rough hand covering hers. "You're safe here. This is your home, if you'll have it." The firelight danced in her eyes as she whispered, "With you, it feels like it could be." Outside, the wind howled across Clear Creek Valley, carrying with it the echoes of all they had endured. Inside, warmth held them close, a fragile promise of what might be. Yet even as Clara leaned into William's presence, one question lingered, unspoken but undeniable. Could their love, born in the midst of conflict, stand against the storms still waiting beyond the valley? The answer remained unwritten, hanging between the crackle of firewood and the beating of two uncertain but hopeful hearts. From humiliation in the marketplace to courage in the courtroom, Clara and William's journey shows us that dignity and love can take root even in the harshest soil. The world may laugh, may doubt, may conspire, but truth and loyalty have a way of breaking through. I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Every time I see your comments, I'm reminded how stories connect us across distances and hearts. If you still believe in love, don't turn away. The next story waiting here may be the one meant for you.